Thank you for joining for this episode of the TechSpective podcast. I have Ankur Singla from Exaforce with me. If you would introduce yourself and give a little bit of background on you and on Exaforce.
Sure, Tony. My name is Ankur Singla. As you said, I'm the founder and CEO of Exaforce. We started this company 2 years back based on my experience running a fairly large size managed services security portfolio at F5. Basically, we were doing anti-automation, anti-bot for some of the largest Fortune 50 and Fortune 500 companies. And there, what I realized is that there's a lot of manual processes in the SOC, and even the threat detection itself is not ideal. So what we said is, the time has come for applying AI in the right way, and that's how we got started with some of my friends from Google and Palo Alto. And literally a few months later, the ChatGPT was launched, and that led to frenzy, right? So that's where that's kind of a little bit of the background of the company and how we got started. Prior to that, I've done lots of different companies. I've done Contrail, which was acquired by Juniper, Aruba, that was acquired by HP. And so I've been in the industry doing cybersecurity and network security for a long time. And that's basically the background for the company and myself.
All right. Well, so I mean, one of the focuses, and you're definitely not alone in this, because I've had many conversations, for written content. I've had conversations on the podcast. There's a lot of momentum behind the idea of the AI-powered SOC. Like once we got to generative AI, and especially now that we're kind of moving into agentic AI, MCP, all of these things really give us really good tools for this. Like give us solid tools for being able to automate a lot of that stuff. Of course, the attackers are also automating with AI. So we're in a little bit of an AI arms race. So I guess for starters, like, what are your thoughts on the AI powered SOC? Like, how do we use that effectively?
Yeah, I mean, if you really look at it, the momentum is definitely there when it comes to the discussions and the thought process. Obviously, deployments lag the thinking, right? You got to start thinking about something first and then get to deployment. But if you really take a step back, right? And you think about what are the problems that the SOC faces. One is you got to detect threats. If you cannot detect threats, you can't investigate them. And so triaging is always, has to be preceded by detections. And then there is threat hunting, threat modeling, all of these things come into play in the SOC, right? So from my point of view, I think different types of AI technologies, whether it's generative AI when it comes to reasoning and basically gathering the right amount of evidence, that applies really well towards the triage or the investigation phase. Definitely applies even to threat hunting. But threat detection has to be done slightly differently. You can't apply a large language model, for example, to threat detection in a cost-effective and the latency that is required to actually do it for incoming log stream. So in my opinion, the AI SOC capabilities with different types of machine learning models need to be applied for AI SOC. And that's actually one of the reasons why we built the model the way we built it, right? Think of it as a knowledge distillation model where you distill the amount of knowledge that eventually leads to the Gen AI piece or the large language model piece to do reasoning. But before that, a lot of the heavy lifting is done by other AI models in order to basically deliver outcomes for threat detection, for triage and investigation, for threat hunting, for threat modeling, and basically ad hoc searches.
Okay, all right. So you talk about the triage, hunting, containment. Where do you think, so where we are right now today, where do you think AI agents are capable of adding the most value? And where do you think you still need a human in the loop? And I think you touched on it a little bit with the kind of the threat hunting aspect of it, where like there's certain things that like don't lend themselves as well to automation.
I think the thing that actually it's not about whether it lends itself well to automation, or it's actually more about which AI technique is used for which part of the work, right? And I think humans don't get out of the loop. The humans do remain in the loop for quite some time, maybe forever. But if you look at threat detection, that human cannot be in the loop of detecting a threat. Otherwise, it won't work at machine speed, right? The attacks happen at machine speed, events are happening at machine speed. So that needs to be the detection piece needs to be happening using an AI machine learning model or using rules. I mean, we use combination of those things in the industry today, right? So those two need to happen without human in the loop from a detection point of view. What detections to do, how to tune the models, all of that is done by the human. So definitely there's a human in the loop when it comes to threat detection. If you look at the investigation of the triage piece of the threats that are being detected, I think we have reached a point where a lot of the heavy lift can be done by the generative AI models or a model like what we have proposed, right? So what we use in our pipeline works really well from a tier one to tier three triage point of view. So threat detection, slightly different thinking. On the triage, we definitely feel generative AI is at a point where it can be applied fairly effectively. On threat hunting, it's actually a little bit more complex than that. And you can take some of the techniques from the on the alert triage piece into threat hunting. So, for example, automated query generation, being able to compress the data while you are actually doing some more analysis on it, writing files, reading files, creating scripts. All of that can be done by a combination of generative AI and a very good data pipeline or a data model that sits inside your data warehouse. So I think generative AI can help the humans in almost every aspect of the SOC today. But its application is a little bit different. Its thought process on how to use it is different. The agents that are doing that work are slightly different and built in a slightly different way for each of those aspects.
Yeah, well, okay, so I have a couple of things there. Number one is I think one of the things that I think we're only just kind of starting to do is like we went from generative AI to agentic AI, and so like I think pretty much everyone in the tech and cybersecurity space at this point has heard of AI agents and agentic AI.
Yeah.
What I think people don't yet fully get is the uniqueness of those agents. It's not like, oh, we're just going to turn on agentic AI. It's like, well, no, there's an agent that does it's like hiring people. Like it's like that person has that role and that person has that role. Like they have different jobs. And that AI agent is very good at doing that one thing and working with this other AI agent in a collaborative manner. Again, it's like hiring a team of people. So that's one aspect, is that these AI agents are specific. They're trained to do specific things. The other thing, though, that comes with that, and I think we're going to get there very quickly, is, I mean, everyone, certainly everyone that listens to this podcast knows by now the general evolution of technologies where like it comes out, everyone says, wow, that's really cool. We can do so many cool things with that. Let's jump on that. After it has momentum, someone says, hey, wait, we should probably secure that. And then we try to go back and figure out how to protect it. The same thing is going to happen here. And part of it is going to be, we've already seen examples of security researchers and or threat actors working with prompt injection, working with how do I engineer a prompt that gets ChatGPT or DeepSeek or whatever to go around its guardrails and give me an answer that it shouldn't give me. How do I get it to give me access to things that people don't think I should have access to? And that same sort of jailbreaking mentality is going to be used to hijack your AI agent. Like your AI agent that you think is doing threat intelligence for you, your AI agent that you think is sifting through logs to look for anomalous activity for your SOC for you, the attackers are going to figure out how to hijack that. And it's going to start feeding you incorrect information based on what the attackers want it to do.
That's right. I think so. Let's take each one of those things that you describe or your thinking and basically go through each one of them, right? So from my point of view, task-specific bots is the reality of today, right? I think generative AI hasn't reached a point where it's able to do everything perfectly. So you have to build task-specific bots, task-specific agents. I think we are in that realm today, and I think that basically goes without saying that you'll have to build, for example, an agent that is really good at figuring out what's happening on email phishing and then how to respond to that, versus something that does really well for AWS Guard Duty. And even within AWS Guard Duty, you basically have an agent that works really well for Kubernetes versus works really well for, RDS database attacks and what Guard Duty is finding. So I think the task specific bot thing that you just talked about, that makes a lot of sense. I think we will see that for the next 3 to 4 years. And you'll have a repository of different bots, just like humans have different skills. They get trained in different things. That's what the AI agents will do. Now, as far as hijacking of the agents goes, that is becoming a big problem, especially with MCP, and there's lack of authentication and bunch of other issues on the MCP side. So what we should really think about is don't let don't let user prompts or even system prompts be done in such a way that the attackers can use it. It really needs to come from your data warehouse. So if we say that the platform that is doing all of this AI SOC work is protected and is actually not accessible to anyone outside the SOC team, then you have one level of guardrails put in place that prevents somebody from injecting a prompt. The second thing is that data containing the prompt or not, right? And does the prompt contain the data? And how do you actually secure that? We really need to think about this as an industry and make sure that the data warehouse prevents some of this hijacking capabilities. How the data is presented and accumulated and shared with the agent has to be done in such a way that prompt injections don't happen, because you're not allowing somebody else to write a system prompt, and through the user prompt you don't let data infiltrate. But you will see more and more of these problems. They'll have to be solved on a case by case basis. As you said, you first build you build the technology, then you figure out how to secure it, and then somebody figures out how to break it, and you continue to protect it, right?
Well, and as this evolves, I mean, there are going to be startups that come into existence that focus on just that. Like I feel like there's something, so it's like right now we have startups who are like, oh well, here's an agentic, here's an AI agent that you can deploy that does this specific thing, and you say, okay, well, cool. Eventually, there's going to need to be a company that says, okay, but here's an AI agent that monitors your other AI agent to make sure that it's doing the thing that you wanted it to do and hasn't been hijacked and co-opted into doing things it shouldn't be doing.
So I think of it as like ITDR, right? So if you really look at humans, we have ITDR, which is basically making sure a combination of ITDR, IGA, authentication systems, directories. You'll need all of these capabilities for agents, because agents start to look like machines or humans. I mean, we did really poorly when it came to machine identities, right? We went from human identities to machine identities, and now we're going to go to agentic or agent identities. I think we really need to go back and holistically solve this problem from the point of view of machines and agents that look like machines that are actually humans, right? So I think you'll see an evolution in both the IGA and the authentication systems, in the authorization systems, as well as ITDR, which takes care of some of these issues. And the MCP has to be advanced as well, with proper authentication authorization capabilities built in. And without that, it's going to be a mess, right? Now, if you go and use Cloud Code, for example, the first thing you do is you put your credentials in, right? That's a usually short-lived token. But now what happens is that token is a machine identity. That machine identity was assumed because of you. So all of that needs to be tied back into the ITDR, into the IGA system, right? So if you use Exaforce, you'll see that visibility, because we track all the machine identities, we track all the agent identities, and stuff like that. But I think that as an industry, we'll have to go work on extending the human identities to machine identities to agent identities properly, and kind of stitch all of that together. I don't think it's hard. I think we have the tools in place. They just need to be implemented properly, right? And they're not easy to implement. If you look at proper implementation of PAM, IGA, authentication systems, authorization, and ITDR, only the largest companies do that properly, right? Most of the mid-size and startups are not able to do it because it's complex.
Okay. When you look at AI, the concept of the AI SOC and what it what you're trying to achieve by using something like that. What do you think are the what are the kind of 2 or 3 KPIs that you would that you would use with the board to basically demonstrate, hey, look, we've invested in this AI SOC and it's working. Like, I mean, we can look at mean time to detection. We could look at the percent of closed alerts. We could look at coverage of MITRE. Like what KPIs do you think make sense?
I think one of the things that I never thought about would be an interesting one in the beginning of when we started the company, and I start to appreciate that more now, is the amount of work or human equivalent work that bots can do for you at a much lower cost point, right? So for example, if I deploy in a customer, let's say it's a mid-sized customer between 500 to 1,000 employees, or like something like a high growth startup, right? They're not going to hire 20 or 10 SOC engineers or SecOps team members, right? They'll probably have 2 or 3. But if you put, AI agents and AI SOC capability in your environment, you may be able to get a human equivalent work of 20 people, right? I think that's an interesting KPI because all of a sudden you have democratized SOC, right? Because today these big SOCs can only be built by some of the largest companies. Even mid-sized companies don't have the resources to do a proper SOC. So I think that is a KPI I never thought about. It's always like, okay, MTTI, MTTR, MTTA. These are like always, aspects people think about. But really, I think the more interesting thing is how much more work can be done at, let's say, half the cost, right? I think that's a very interesting metric people should also look at. The other thing is false negatives, right? You deploy something new, you want to make sure you're not, leaving important threats on the table, right? Which you were able to cover before. So the other KPI I think the boards will ask for and good CISOs will always ask for is, hey, am I actually leaving something on the table by going to this new technology versus what? So I had pretty decent coverage, I thought. And now I have better coverage, but am I missing something really important, right? So false negatives are also extremely important to monitor when it comes to KPIs with the AI SOC capabilities.
Yeah. It's interesting, when you talk about like the force multiplier aspect of it.
Yeah.
And I will say, I feel like there has been a slight shift in, say, the last 6 months in the conversations I've had. But for the first 1.5 to 2 years of the whole generative AI, explosion, I feel like there was like some sort of like memo went around to all C-level executives and boards across industries to all say the same mantra of AI is here to augment people, not replace people. Like, I think there was a lot of sensitivity about, hey, if we start deploying AI, everyone's going to think we're coming for their jobs. And they spent 1.5 to 2 years telling me repeatedly, we're not coming for your jobs. We're coming, because, like you just pointed out, like the SOC, if you go back 2 years or even today, but definitely if you go back 2 years, like a SOC analyst is generally overwhelmed. Like they're and it's not, on the one hand, we can say, look, I can go out on LinkedIn. There are so many people looking for jobs. I'm sure someone would be more than happy to take a job and work in your SOC. But you can only throw so many people at that effort. And to the point you made at the very beginning of this podcast, you have to fight machine speed attacks at machine speed. So you're adding more humans doesn't really solve your problem. That said, like I said, in the last 6 months, I feel like it has shifted a little bit. There has been more acknowledgement of the fact that, yes, right now, if I've got 10 SOC analysts I can use AI and I can force multiply, and my 10 SOC analysts can act like 100 SOC analysts. But at some point, it does take a job. It does mean that I don't need to hire someone else. And that's not just true of SOC analysts. It's true of, it's true of content creators. It's true of coders. It's true of a lot of things where it's like, yes, initially I can say, I'm not coming for your job. I'm not trying to replace you. But at some point, it's like, okay, but if I can use it as a force multiplier that allows me to generate 10 times more content, then that's 9 people I don't need to hire.
Yep. So if you go back, right, when email came around and people saying, oh, why do we need mailmen, right? And now we have so many boxes being transacted through e-commerce that we need probably more delivery people, right? So if you really look at it, I think job shift. People should be willing to shift their perspective on what they do and what value they're adding, right? And this may create like a lot more jobs for certain new tasks that were not thought of before, right? But if you really go back and think about it, if you can do work at machine speed, one of the biggest problems that the companies faced was, I don't have enough analyst capacity, so I'm going to turn off a whole bunch of rules in my detections. I'm going to detect enough things that I can triage, right? Or my queue will become so big that it'll never converge, right? But what if you could actually triage at machine speed, not just detect at machine speed, and you can detect more things and you basically leave less false negatives on the table, right? So from my point of view, I think we should apply technology where we actually naturally have to apply it, because if we don't, then the attackers will overwhelm and break through, right? So I think the time has come where the narrative cannot be about, am I going to save jobs or not, or am I going to shift the jobs to something new, something more, interesting to do. So for example, can an analyst do a lot more interesting job because now he has all these tools, which doesn't require him to have all the skills, right? He needs to have first principle understanding of what Kubernetes does. What EKS does versus EKE doesn't matter, right? If you look at DLP, they need to have principle of what insider threat means, what external threats mean, how do they impact data loss, right? And how data loss manifests itself. Exactly how it's done in Google Workspaces versus Office 365 doesn't matter, right? So I think really what needs to happen is people need to elevate their skills. There needs to be a consensus that we've got to detect at machine speed, which I think we're already there. We got to triage at machine speed, and we need to triage more things and not tune things off, right? And that can only be done if we do stuff with machines.
Yeah. Well, and I will say, if you go back and listen to the last 5-6 episodes of this podcast, I mean, one of the things that I have talked about with previous guests is this realization I had, a year ago about, there was a study that came out about how people are worse today at reading and interpreting maps, because we all have GPS. And so I mean, and I've talked about the example of, yes, when I was in high school and I delivered pizza, I had the whole city map memorized. I mean, you could give me an address and I knew exactly where that was, and I could get from point A to point B without looking at anything. Yeah. Because I had to. Like that was the job. Now, I mean, it's like I know the major roads, but I don't need to know those things. Like,
yeah, you don't need to. Like my dad could do all multiplication tables in his head. I couldn't, and I had a calculator, right? My kids have a computer, so I think that's a natural evolution of humans, right? They just got to live with the fact that we got to evolve.
Yeah, and so in the previous conversations, what we've talked about is this, like I said that one of the things that kind of came up for me around that research, that study, was I was like, yeah. We talk about how we have, you need to double check the results. Like you can't just trust the results of the AI. You need to check it. You need to look at what you're doing and use it as a tool, not as the gospel truth.
Yeah.
And I said, well, yeah, I can do that today because I've been writing for 20 plus years. So like when I see something, I can review it and say, yes, okay, that's right, that's wrong, let's change this. Someone who's been coding can do that. Someone who is a SOC analyst can do that. But I was like, okay, but what happens when we fast forward 5 years and you have a generation of people who come into the workforce without the prior experience, and they're raised on just using the AI and relying on the AI in the first place. And I mean, it's a philosophical question, because on the one hand, I'm looking at that through the lens of legacy, through the lens of this is the way we've always done it. So how is it going to get broken? When the reality is, like you just pointed out with your calculator example, the reality is just I'm not being creative enough to envision what it will look like in 5 years. Like it's not that basically the whole question will shift. I'm asking the wrong question because I'm asking the question based on the past.
Correct. And I think that's what we have to get really comfortable with, right? That we have to upskill ourselves. We have to do something different and add more value and use these AI tools natively as part of our lives, right? We basically will have to live with the fact that, hey, the triage is being done by the machine and I need to go analyze whether it's doing the right thing or not. Or I might employ a more expensive model to go validate it, right? Because certain things can be done a little bit slower and you can have many more of them and it costs more money. And then I'll do even more sophisticated stuff, right? So I think we just have to evolve with the technology evolution. We can't say, I'm going to sit here and then somebody else will basically do the job for me. Yeah.
I mean, the other very, very, very common example people use when talking about these shifts is, the shift from horse and carriage to the automobile. And, it's like, and what did all the, people who put horseshoes on horses do? What did all the people who built wagon wheels do? Like those things. I mean, yes, jobs go away, but new jobs are created. Now you need auto mechanics who understand how carburetors work, and different things.
If you look at the e-commerce, right? Like I always think about all the strip malls and everything else that we have. They're slowly going away. The big malls are getting decimated. But what is happening to those merchants? Those merchants are shifting to becoming third-party merchants on Amazon, right? And their actually business is probably even better than what that was before because they can reach a global audience versus reaching just their neighborhood, right? So if you really broaden your mindset and think about, okay, how can I use this as an opportunity versus this is going to hold me back? Obviously, your thinking is going to be negative, right?
Well, and one of the things, and actually, I'll use this as a setup for my next question. One of the things is learning how to use the force multiplier. It's so like, yeah. And I've said this now for 2 years too. Of it's not that AI is going to take your job. It's that someone who knows how to use AI better than you is going to take your job. And so it comes down to, how good are you at prompting the AI? How good are you at using the AI to get to the results you need? And so which brings me to my question, which is, what are your thoughts on from an AI SOC perspective? How do we upskill analysts so that they don't treat AI as an infallible oracle, or as just a toy that they know how to use it effectively? Like how do we enable that?
I think we need to basically make sure that the analysts that we hire understand basic principles of what certain things mean, right? They really know. I think a time will come where they don't need to be an expert on a certain API or a certain CLI or a certain SQL. They really don't need to know that, right? What they need to understand is the basic principles. So going back to basic principles is going to be so important in life going forward because AI can do the rest of the work for you, right? If you're not using AI through and through at every part of your journey in your life, it's going to become a hindrance to your growth, in my opinion, right? So I think it's not just SOC analysts, it's every aspect of our job, right? In any job, you really need to use AI natively, and kids are already doing it. Like my son's always talking to ChatGPT as his friend, right? So I think we're going to reach a point where it's going to become a native workflow of what we do, right? Like every morning you wake up, you start using your phone, you use your computer. AI will become like that, right? You don't need to do a lot of prompting. It'll actually start to understand you a lot better than what we even think about today. So I think more than prompting, going back to basics, like what are the right questions to ask? what are the right things to go ask it to do. That will be more important going forward.
Well, and therein lies for me both this huge potential, like sort of utopian vision versus this possible dystopian tragedy. of, because on the one hand, I frequently say that, you know, the goal here is Tony Stark's Jarvis, Iron Man's Jarvis. The goal is, we want an AI that understands you at a personal level, that isn't just like I've got Microsoft Word, you've got Microsoft Word, someone else has Microsoft Word, we can all write an article or create a document in Microsoft Word, but that knows who I am, my voice, what I'm interested in, what I like, what I don't like, all of those things, so that it's very unique. And I use the example of like the smartphone, digital assistants, where it's like out of the box, if everyone gets an iPhone, out of the box, it's all the same. Like we've got the same AI.
Yeah.
And for the most part, up to now, it remains the same AI. Like there's very little difference between, my iPhone assistant and my wife's iPhone assistant, or your iPhone assistant. But I want there to be, like, I think that's the goal. The goal should be out of the box, it's the same. But if you come back 6 months later, mine should be very different than yours. Mine should know things about me, and it should be giving me those answers from that perspective. So that's kind of the utopian version. The dystopian version again comes back to okay, but then what if we get there? Like, what if we get to a point where like it knows all these things about me, and especially as people are talking about agentic AI on that personal assistant level of being able to like access my bank accounts, access my calendar, make plans for me, take automated actions on my behalf, which again, if it was a human executive assistant, that is kind of what you hire them for. You hire them to know enough about you to take proactive action on your behalf so that you don't have to. And if we want AI agents to do that, again, utopian version, that's great. Dystopian version, someone hijacks that. Someone gets into that. And now it's doing things I don't want it to do. And it's drained my bank account. And it's, and so like there's, that to me, those are the two futures.
And you see those two futures simultaneously. We see it today, right? If you look at your admin, she can get phished. She can get phished all day long, right? So I think you will see that dystopian future is here. It's actually already here. If you look at Claude, if you're using Claude Desktop, it knows what you've been thinking for the last few days. You can enable that memory feature and it'll actually remember quite a few things about you, right? We have this capability even in our platform, where it actually starts to learn what the system looks like, what the business looks like, what the business behavior looks like, right? So I think that dystopian future is already here, right? And it's going to get better and better. And at the same time, there'll be adversaries who will actually try to attack it, right? You see phishing happening every day. So all of these systems will be attacked, people try to break it and jailbreak it, as you called it, right? So and we'll have to put all kinds of techniques, and we'll have to build all kinds of new techniques to overcome it. And that's the beautiful thing, right? That's why cybersecurity keeps giving. You'll always have very creative individuals who'll try to hijack anything new you build.
Yeah. Well, I'll have to look it up and put it in the post that goes with this podcast. There's a way to go ask, at least for ChatGPT, it probably works for others too, but there's a way to ask ChatGPT, like, well, what do you know about me? And it'll give you a very detailed, like, here's what I've learned from interacting with you. And sometimes it'll catch you by surprise. Like I'll just ask a question generically, and it'll say, well, because you blah blah blah. I'm like, whoa, wait. Like why are you answering this that way? And I've also had to make mistakes where it's like, I've asked a question about this in the past. Now it's 2 weeks later, I'm asking a completely unrelated question, but it somehow is linking it back to the thing that I asked 2 weeks ago. And I'm like, all right, well, those two things aren't related. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know why you're trying to connect those dots. But it is interesting. I think if you've used ChatGPT at all over time to do that prompt and find out like, well, what does it think it knows about me? Is an interesting exercise.
And that's the memory feature, right? That's the feature called memory. And what it basically does is distills things down, all the relevant things it needs to remember about whatever you have done, right? And I clearly see a future coming where the AI will know more, and because it actually can work at machine speed, it'll be able to remember more things and tell you more things than you would ever, and you'll be surprised every time, right? I think we're going to reach there fairly quickly. It's not going to be more than a year.
Okay. So what does the future look like? And I had phrased this in my questions as like a 12 to 18 months, but that might be short. I don't know. Things move fast. I was gonna say it might be short. Maybe it's too long. When it comes to AI SOC, when it comes to autonomy, is there a red line? Like, is there something that you think we should never let an AI agent do without human consent?
I think there are quite a few things where I still feel that it's a good idea to have human in the loop. So, for example, this is a tragedy that happened with me in my previous company. I was on a Zoom call like this, right? And all of a sudden, my Zoom call stopped working. My device went off the F5 network. And the reason that happened is because somebody wrote automation that if the device is BYOD and CrowdStrike detects it as a BYOD device, turn that device off, right? Take it off the network. And what if there was a mistake? What if there was bad automation or misconfiguration in CrowdStrike? And literally that's what happened. Pissed me off, pissed off one of the customers that I was on the call with, and it just looked bad overall, right? So I really think that we are at a point where we need to have enough guardrails. We need to have human in the loop for taking lots of these response actions, things that can be disruptive to the business, can be disruptive to a human. I think we really need to take that fairly seriously. I don't think AI is at a point where we can truly rely on it to do autonomous tasks. But we definitely can rely on it to do autonomous thinking and come back and tell us what to do next, right? I think that's where we are today. Maybe in 12 months we'll be at a different spot. I'm telling you that 12 months back, AI was much worse than where we are today, right? And in 12 months, we'll be in much better shape. Like, for example, Opus 4.1 is amazing now, right? But if you try to do Cloud Code or something like a Cloud Code a year back, it wasn't very good, right? So I think we got to take it literally month by month in where we are today.
Well, and one of the things too is, growing up on Terminator and war games and stuff is like, I've been conditioned from a very early age to know that when you put your faith in AI, it leads to the destruction of humanity. And again, going back to the utopian versus dystopian, there is a path where it doesn't lead to the destruction of humanity, where it leads to the progression of humanity, where it's like this is a great thing. And then there's this other path where it's like, all right, no, there's nuclear Armageddon and everything falls apart. And so I agree with you. Like, things have changed fast. Things have improved a lot in a year and 2 years. Who knows what it will look like in a year or 2 years from now? Especially as we get to AGI. And so I think there's tremendous potential there. That said, where we sit today, I get really nervous when I see headlines that we're just going to deploy, Grok in the Pentagon and tie that into defense systems. I'm like, are you insane? like 3 weeks ago, Grok was praising Hitler.
Yeah, and it still probably is. Right?
Yeah.
I definitely feel the pain, right? I don't think we are at a point where we should, put critical systems completely in the hands of AI. Actually, almost any system. We need to have enough guardrails in place. And hey, China built a great firewall, right? We may have to build a great firewall too, right? For all for a different purpose. so that people don't, kill each other. I think we don't know what all will happen in the future, and as long as we remain smart and we are the ones who built AI, we'll figure out a way to tackle it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and what. Yeah, that's a whole different. That's a whole separate podcast. Like, I was gonna say, like, I respect that China is a frenemy. Like, I mean, they're simultaneously like our biggest partner and our biggest enemy. And there's a lot of IP theft. There's a lot of stuff that goes on there, and I'm sure we're guilty of it too. Like all we see as Americans are the headlines about China broke into this and China did that, and it's like, well, what's the United States doing in China? Like, I'm sure we're not innocent here. And that said, when those things come out, like when DeepSeek hit, and everyone was like, well, don't use DeepSeek. When you use DeepSeek, the Chinese government gets to see everything. I'm like, that's true of like everything, every company you interact with.
Yep.
That works in China. Like it's part of working in China. It's just it's built into the government there. So it's like, that's universally true. But what we were ignoring with that part of the conversation is there was this sort of implicit assumption that like, well, you shouldn't use DeepSeek because it's Chinese. You should use Grok. You should use OpenAI because, ChatGPT, because those are American. I'm like, what makes you think I trust those people more than I trust China? Yeah. Like, those platforms are literally being used against us right now, to propagandize, right-wing conspiracies and everything else. I'm like, so why, honestly, China might be the better choice in some cases.
And some things, do I even care about that information, right? There's like a whole bunch of information I don't care about, and it's okay to share with whoever. And things that you care about, you should be careful, not just with Chinese companies, but also American companies or European, or for that matter, any company.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like, because right now we're like they're supposedly finalizing for the umpteenth time this deal to like take over TikTok, and I'm like, okay, well, like I said,
how is that not friends and family? Somebody tell me, how is that not friends and family? Like that whole deal takeover deal.
Well, I'm on the one hand, I'm like, I don't really care that China has access to this or is controlling the algorithm. And again, I don't distrust China any more than I distrust Larry Ellison or anyone else.
It's the gang of three is friends and family of our president. So life is great, right?
And in the end, my family, like everyone I know, like we're just gonna uninstall it. Like I'm not gonna use your US controlled propagandized version of TikTok.
Yeah. That's true. I completely agree. I think a lot of this is farce, and we just got to be mindful. And I'm sure AI can actually help us being more mindful.
Yeah. All right. Well, like I said, that's a good setup for I can have you back on. We can have a future after the TikTok deal goes through. I can have you back on.
Let's do that. Yeah, let's talk about friends and family.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of insanity going on that is far off from the AI SOC topic. That we could dig into, but no, I mean, just kind of tying it back. Like I do think that the AI SOC, I think the SOC is really kind of one of the best first places to really invest with AI. Like there's a lot of things we can do with AI as a society, as humanity, but that in a security operations center is kind of like a no-brainer of, okay, well, the attacks are coming at such a volume and speed, you can't not use AI. And so we need to figure out how to use it smartly.
Yeah, I think the main thing is you got to fight machines with machines. So that's a given, right? But at the same time, you got to like not lose your efficacy, right? You got to believe in the precision, right? So while AI can help you fight the AI attacks, you really need to think about doing it in an effective manner, making sure you're not losing precision. And that's a balancing act, right? That's a trade-off that we really need to get our act together on.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for taking the time to chat. It was a good conversation.
Cool. Thanks, Tony. See you.
All right. Take care.
Bye.